Hello, my name is Christian Congas, and today I'll be talking to you about an episode of The Drum, 26th of March, Tuesday. On this week, it is Ellen Fanning who is the host, who is a journalist, Australian journalist, who since 2017 has been co-hosting The Drum and used to work for the Nine Network's Sunday television program. With her this week is a panel starring of Roxanne Gay, Christopher Pepperneff, Annabelle Crabb, Eddie Sinon, and Scintilla Chingapai. Now, four main topics that have been discussed. First, bad feminists, fat phobia, One Nation foreign donations, and Australia and its multicultural aspects. Today, I'll be focusing on One Nation foreign donations and Australia and its multicultural aspects. The One Nation government party trying to acquire donations from the American NRA is honestly terrifying to me as a very young Australian. Now, after Port Arthur in Tasmania, which was one of the biggest, and still today, biggest massacre in the world, Australia decided to really go strict on the gun laws. Now, this has proven very successful and beneficial for every party in Australia, making our citizens and our country a much safer place. The ethical debate is that One Nation, Australian political party, has gone over and tried to acquire foreign donations from the NRA, which is National Rifle Association. Not only is this a very skeptical idea to start with, but what the NRA wanted in return from the Australian party was actually looser gun laws, which was meaning that we as a party, if the One Nation were elected, they would change the gun laws to benefit not only their party and what they believe in, but also America. A quote from Brandy Graham, who is part of a American political party and also advocate for the NRA, they said, that helps us because the biggest argument we always get from folks is, well, look at Australia. Now, this just brings up many fatal flaws that has been addressed in this week's drum, and I personally think it's a very big ethical debate because it's unsafe. They are, the One Nation, acquiring donations from a foreign political party who have ulterior motives to try and get what they want. And by doing so, they're trying to gain more political power in the Australian government and more seats for One Nation. They also talk about targeting women as a main tactic to get Australia to open up the gun laws. There's been several times where they've talked about it, and they say if the woman of the house does not agree, then there will be a debate. But if the woman does agree, then it can simply slide under the rug. This again is a very big ethical debate, targeting a certain person in a household or just a gender in society to try and get a political motivation out of it. Now, as the Port Arthur massacre in Australia, which was one of the biggest, had a total of 35 people killed and 23 people wounded in 1996. Now, we decided a very long time ago that we were going to stop the gun laws. So the One Nation government, just because of the light of certain things that have been happening around the world, have tried to change this and really trying to affect other people for a political bonus, which they might not even agree with. They might have these policies just to gain power, but they really have ulterior motives to do whatever they want when they're in government. What they are saying can be something ridiculous, but people might agree with it because they feel scared and prosecuted because of these silly allegations that One Nation have been claiming. They've also said that the Al Jazeera campaign is a Muslim spy act, and they have reported them to ASIO and the Australian Federal Police. Now, Scott Morrison comments on this, and his comment is actually extremely two-sided. The reason why he responds was so pathetic is because it's coming up to the federal election, and he's playing both sides of the fence. He knows that he needs certain support in Victoria and the northern part of Queensland to secure his reign of embarrassment, so he is trying to tick both boxes, and he's not saying any definitive at all. Scintilla makes a great point in this discussion She talks about how if a non-white human in Australia made the comments that One Nation said, they'd be put on a watch list for terrorism and or treason, including the Anti-Discrimination Act. So what I don't understand is, why are we letting criminals and racists be a part of our government? Why are we giving them so much power today? And we as a citizens should have more control over who says what in our country. The One Nation Party is spreading to many Australians who feel threatened of recent acts, but we as a nation need to reassure ourselves that immigrants and different cultures are not the problem. The problem is our government, and our government has been failing us for many years. Now, the transition into the second ethical debate that I was interested in drum, and it's the Australian multicultural aspects. Australia has had a very large and long history of being a racist and prejudiced country. Our history has made it very hard for our nation to change as a whole and be more culturally acceptable in today's society. We have made very progressive leaps in the past decade or so. However, these leaps are not enough. Unfortunately, there are two parts of Australia. One part of Australia recognises that we are moving forward to be a very more multicultural, acceptable society, but we do realise that it's not enough in today's society. We are still very culturally incompetent as a country, and on the spectrum, very bad. There is another one. There's the minority of Australians who think that we are doing enough for the multicultural aspects, or simply don't care about them. Now, the one thing that's horrible is that people think that the minority of Australia who have these racist, ignorant and prejudiced thoughts have the bigger voice. They do not have the bigger voice. We in Australia, as a majority of a cultural accepting people, we do really need to make sure that everyone is on side and everyone is looking at the bigger picture here today, that we are all humans. An example of this that has been brought up in a previous episode of The Drum is the increase of youth suicide in Indigenous Australians. Now, the one thing that's horrible about this is that because people in Australia think that we're doing enough, people are getting extremely prejudiced, and the youth Indigenous Australian population have been copying the brunt of this. As I said, the increase over the couple of years of the youth suicide has been absolutely tremendous and horrible. Today, the main result of the multicultural aspects is our conversations. We are bringing these conversations up without using correct terminology, and it's a non-culturally sensitive way to discuss about this. Now, this is resulting in large amounts of prejudice spreading in public forums and normal conversations around the world, especially with today's age and the internet. Cyberbullying, racist forums, websites, and other social platforms are being used to spread hate from the minorities of Australians who are racist and ignorant. Now, we can only expect change when we put time and effort into changing the current ethical conversations and dilemmas of racism we have in Australia, and we do need to address it correctly. Now, the overall ethics in this topic of the drum is in relation to the citizens of Australia, and the majority of citizens Australian are not Indigenous Australians. Therefore, it is not up to us to decide how we treat other multicultural aspects of Australians. We should not decide who comes and who goes, and especially how they should be treated in Australia. We should treat everyone with their given human rights as a human on today's earth. Overall, both topics discussed on the drum have raised very ethical decisions and debates that bring the light to the poor choices of the political party One Nation, and also the minority of Australian citizens who are still not recognising this country as a culturally incompetent nation. We should have faith in our politicians' attempts and try to advantage our country rather than disadvantage it in order to gain more political power for the party of Australia. The One Nation are going to have very vast consequences for the current aspects and the situation that they've put themselves in Australia, which will affect every Australian citizen and everyone in the world to some extent. We also need to discuss the current racial cultural aspects that has been formed even more today than current previous years. We need to openly discuss what is happening in today's society with educational panels and an open-minded for multiculturalism in today's society. Overall, the One Nation scandal and the multicultural aspects of Australia both have raised very ethical dilemmas. I am agreeing to some of the panel's discussion, but also they need to realise that Australia not as a whole is an ignorant country, but is the minorities that think we are doing enough or don't think that we should do anything at all, which is ruining Australia as a country today. Thank you for your time and thank you for watching.